Welcome back to the Mercy Cast, where we are learning the art of compassion through the adversity of life. I'm your host, Raleigh Sadler. Today, I'm really excited because my guest is Morgan Gleeson. She is the Assistant Executive Director of Pillars of Hope, an anti-trafficking nonprofit. And why this is really important for me is because Morgan is one of my former interns that let my people go. And to see her as an Assistant Executive Director, it makes my heart full. It has been really cool. And I just noticed it recently. And I'm like, when did this happen? And then I realized it's been 5 years since she was my intern. So a lot of life has happened in 5 years. But I wanted to bring her on to the Mercy Cast because she has a story to share. So Morgan, welcome to the Mercy Cast.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
So we've got 5 years to catch up on. First of all, tell me more about Pillars of Hope and how you got there.
Yeah, so Pillars of Hope is an amazing organization. It is a foundation-wise, we are a Christian organization. We work in direct services and provide hand-to-hand assistance to any individual that's been trafficked, whether that's assisting in travel funds, food funds, clothing funds. We also assist them in rehabilitating back into society. And when we do different street outreaches where we work in person and we go to different blades in the Bay Area, we'll try and take them off the street if we can as well.
So you are meeting people where they are and providing multiple services to help them.
Yes.
And has this been something you've done before this job? Were you at another anti-trafficking nonprofit between Let My People Go and Pillars of Hope?
You know, I actually wasn't. Let My People Go was my first internship. It was one of the ones that made me love working for nonprofit organizations. I was in my undergrad at the time, and I knew I wanted to do one more internship that was more on the public sector. So I interned at the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office in California in their anti-human trafficking unit. I quickly realized I didn't want to work in the public sector because I was the only intern not going to law school. That became very obvious. I did not belong there, which is totally fine. I think what they do is amazing. It is so impressive, but I think working in that made it clear to me kind of the direction I wanted to go into. I graduated from my undergrad and continued to pursue my education in anti-human trafficking.
You gave us a map because a lot of us are trying to figure out, how do I get to where I want to go? How do I end up, like, if I have a passion for something, how do I get there? You started with an internship, tried the ADA's office, and that didn't work for you. Sometimes it's just hit or miss. We're just walking down a long hallway and we're checking doors. Sometimes you open a door and you're like, no, I do not want to go in there. I do not. I'm going to shut the door slowly. I'm going to back away slowly and then run down the hall. I love that because I feel like that's very true to life. It's so easy to want to figure it out, but sometimes it takes trying things on and seeing if they fit. So the ADA thing didn't work out. So you just continued learning, continued growing. How did that lead you to Pillars of Hope?
I did my internship at the district attorney's office. I was in Oregon doing school. So I moved from the Bay Area, California to Oregon when I was 18. I lived there for 5 years. I moved by myself, which I think was a big deal. I think it helped me grow a lot to explore different avenues in terms of getting into different types of careers. Once I finished my undergrad, I did my master's in Oregon as well in public administration when I realized I wanted to work in the business side of anti-human trafficking and organizational work. After that, I moved back to California, the Bay Area, which was a really big price jump. So I knew immediately I wanted to start working. However, the job market in California was a lot more brutal to get into. There was just a lot of people applying for jobs that I wanted to. I'd actually been rejected by a lot of anti-human trafficking organizations, even with my specific internships. My emphasis across my degrees was anti-human trafficking, and even then I was still getting rejected. So I started working for a sports company. It was nowhere near what I wanted to do, but I learned so much. I got to really get my hands involved with the business aspect of a smaller company. And then once I kind of realized the time had gone on that I was going to stay there, I had left the company, but I didn't have a job lined up because I was like, I just need to trust that feels like the right decision. I had known about Pillars of Hope for a long time. I'd always been interested in the organization, the different services that they provided, and I knew I wanted to be a part of a direct service organization. And so there was no job applications actually. I had always known who the CEO was, so I had found her email. I sent her this long email pretty much in the most professional way, pretty much begging for an interview. I was so passionate about working in anti-human trafficking. I told her if there's anything they need, whether it's a volunteer or some type of director in a role, and I gave her all of my resume. And then she set up an interview with me and everything went so great. And she hired me right then and there.
That's incredible. And what I love about it is you tell the truth about how you find a role in this space. I went through the same thing. I felt called to fight human trafficking. And I thought, here's a position with a major anti trafficking organization, one of the biggest, and they have a role for college pastors to work with human trafficking. That was me. That was where I was at the time. I sent in my resume and crickets, nothing. Then I started realizing this won't be as easy as I thought. I ended up starting Let My People Go and I kind of went my own way. But then the organization started calling. But yeah, it's interesting. Trusting your gut as you're processing those decisions, that's really important. I love how you said that you got the job at the sports company and then you were like, no, this doesn't fit anymore. This doesn't fit anymore. I'm going to leave now. Yes, yes, I'm going to leave now. I think that's so important because you trusted your gut
A
or
thousand
the Holy
percent. I
Spirit.
think
God gave both to us.
I think God works in wondrous ways. And I think it's really hard when you graduate from college because me being 24, one of the number one comments I get is that I'm very young for my position, that I'm very young to be where I'm at right now. And I think when you graduate from school or when you're in college, you're told you're going to college because it's going to be easier for you to get a job when you have a degree. And I had two of them, and I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to move back to the Bay Area. I'm going to start this awesome position. And then I got back and I was like, nobody wants to hire a freshly graduated student. Because in reality, even though we have these degrees, we're so young, we're so inexperienced. There are so many things that we have yet to discover, even about ourselves. No one tells you it's going to happen. And so it was very, in a certain way, it was kind of defeating a little bit because I was like, wow, I was just told that I'm going to go to college and get a great job right after, and I can't find one.
Morgan, there's a certain humility there that I really appreciate and I want to highlight because so many times when we're interns for organizations, we see how the sausage is made. We see how things go behind the scenes and we think, oh, well, I can do better than that. I can do better than that. But we haven't earned our own credibility by this point. We are on borrowed credibility. We haven't even had to do the hard work. We don't know the questions to ask. We just have this inflated ego sometimes when we go into places thinking, oh, I could totally do that person's job. They don't even have to pay me as much. We could change this whole thing. But I love how you're approaching it. You're saying, no, like I've got a lot to learn. I'm growing. I'm figuring it out. And people will ask, how did someone my age get this role? But I think even the way you said that hints at why. Because if you can approach something with humility as a learner, we go far. I remember when I moved to New York, I didn't know much about human trafficking when I moved to New York to start Let My People Go. And so I had to approach it as a learner because I didn't know what I was talking about for a little bit. And I did, I learned. But when we approach it that way, we don't only set ourselves up for success, but people will trust us because they'll be like, wow, they actually respect me. They're not here just trying to get clout or respect. They're actually here to do the work and figure it out. And I think that goes far. I think that's amazing.
I really appreciate that.
Of course. But it's evident. It's evident. And just for our listeners, you talk about your organization being direct services. They may not know exactly what that means with relation to human trafficking. Could you dig in that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So I always think of nonprofit organizations as the most creative business idea in the business world because you can really take a nonprofit organization and create a mission or a detailed specific service that is a lot easier to perform and a lot easier to provide. And so for Pillars of Hope, and in terms of being a direct service organization, we are able to pretty much assist the person exactly where they're at. A victim can call us on our phone or they can interact with us in person, and anything that they require, whether it be getting into a rescue house, getting off the street, providing them with clothes or food or anything like that, where we are directly handling their case. And so we always like to say that we're working hand in hand with them. It's kind of like holding hands with someone and you're walking through this process with them. Even some of the individuals that we have assisted to come out of human trafficking and to rehabilitate, they still have contact with my boss, or they still contact with other women volunteers that work in our victim assistance program. And so for us, we are pretty much holding hands of individuals that have been trafficked to help them through their process and their healing process to come out of that life.
That sounds very relational.
Even just when we do our street outreaches once a month on the Blade in Vallejo, California, we are walking up to sex workers and we say hello and we offer them prayer and we introduce ourselves. We'll have these full-blown conversations with them where they're talking to us about schooling they want to do or different goals that they have. And we're there in person having these conversations with them. And so I think a lot of what direct service is breaking down the separation or this wall between people who work in a sex working career and people who don't. That kind of paints a picture for me as well in terms of understanding what that looks like.
And even what you just said, that is empowering. You're talking to them about what they want to do, their goals, their dreams, their passions. You're recognizing that ultimately where they are, whether they chose it or not, they don't really want to be there. No one really wants to be there, despite what is communicated through the media. When you talk to someone and you actually hear them say, no, well, ultimately, I would love to own my own business, or I would love to get out of this area and move to this area and start a family or whatever. When you hear that, having conversations like that is a way to empower people. So many times organizations mean well. I think organizations mean well. I don't want to say that they're ignorant or trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but I think some organizations do things for people that they could do for themselves. And that's disempowering. It could be the soup kitchen that keeps feeding people, but doesn't say, hey, let's give you access to a social worker who can help you get the healing you need so that you can get a job or can help you find a few shifts to work so that you can buy your own food. We don't want to create dependence. We want to foster independence. We want to empower people to live that life that they were always meant to live. Because at the end of the day, I think the question of who is the hero really matters. And a lot of times, I know for me, people would come up to me and they're like, I'm so thankful that you're doing the work. And I'm like, my goal is to empower churches to love their neighbor. My goal is to empower churches to empower their neighbor or create an atmosphere of empowerment for their neighbor. And we're not the heroes. The heroes are those people who've been through hell and back and say, I still want to live. I still want to care for people. I want my life to count for something. That's the hero. That person that faces their own trauma, that faces their own past and says, I'm not living here anymore. Our job is to walk alongside. God's not calling us to be heroes. He's calling us to be neighbors who walk alongside of others. And it sounds exactly like what you're doing. Would you agree, disagree?
No, I completely agree. I actually remember that being one of the most pinnacle things I learned at Let My People Go was when me and you had that conversation about understanding individuals and the situations they are at, especially because I wrote that supply and demand resource. And I remember learning that from you so distinctly. And it's something where as I went through school and I did all my other internships, I knew what type of organization I wanted to work for. And I think Pillars of Hope is one of the most humble organizations I've ever interacted with in my life. Just from the people I work with to the volunteers that we have, it is so strongly believed across the entire organization that we are only tools being used by God to assist people in them changing their own lives. And at the end of the day, like a life being changed is something that can only be done through their relationship and walk with God. And it's something we cannot do for them. And I always tell everyone because I have this thing like, wow, this is so amazing what you're doing. You're an amazing person. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I am so lucky and blessed beyond compare for the different things that I received growing up, the ability to go to college, like all these amazing things. But to see the way that individuals that have been trafficked that are coming out of their life are empowering themselves to have a better life because these are people that are broken down to their core as individuals. Their identity as a person is ripped away from them by another human being. They are just skin and bone at some point in their life, and they have to build themselves back up, pick themselves up at the end of the day, and come out of that life and make that decision for themselves. I think as a nonprofit organization that works in direct services, we are able to give them tools so they know they can leave the life they don't need to stay. But overall, that decision and that journey, which is a long journey for many people, is completely up to them.
And I think that is unbelievably honoring to the person because you're not coming into it saying, we're going to fix them. We're going to fix this problem by fixing the people who are trafficked. No, you're saying, no, ultimately, if that person wants to change, that is their decision. If they don't want to
Mhm.
change, I can't change that. I can't make them do the right thing for them. It's just like us. We have to come to a decision where we're cognizant of, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to stay in this situation. I'm going to choose what's best for me. Or if I don't
Mhm.
know what's best for me, I'm going to try to figure it out. I think people being empowered and stepping into who they're becoming, stepping into what they want to be matters. And I love that your organization does that. Also, that was really encouraging. Thank you so much. It was humbling as you were talking about how that point at Let My People Go during the internship kind of shaped you. Could you tell me a little bit more? Because we have never had this conversation. So I would love to hear more of how that internship shaped you for what you're doing now.
Yeah. So when I first learned about anti human trafficking, I think it was maybe a month before I had reached out to you for an internship. I was in my dorm room. I had decided to do criminal justice and I didn't know what direction. I didn't want to be a cop or anything. And I just did some Google researching. I'm not the fighting type, but I can't shoot somebody. So I knew I couldn't be anything that was directly saving lives. And so I learned about anti-human trafficking. I went this deep dive for like 6 hours and I was sobbing my eyes out in my dorm room. And then I started looking into different ways of internships where different internships that I could learn more because at that point I knew absolutely nothing. I knew that anti-human trafficking, the only experience I had or knowledge was that movie Taken that came out, I think in 2012. And that was my only knowledge of human trafficking. I had reached out to let my people go. And that was such an impactful point in my life because I learned so much about human trafficking. And I learned about not only human trafficking, but even learning about nonprofit organizations. I had never really worked with a nonprofit organization. I didn't even know if there was a lot of them. In my mind, there wasn't a lot of them. So I was as green as could be. I was so impressionable at the time where I was so on fire to work in the career that I would have done anything at that point. And I felt like my world had finally opened up to something that was so real and dark that was happening everywhere around me. And I felt like I had no direction. I just knew I wanted to work in anti human trafficking. And when I got with Let My People Go, there were so many things that I had learned that I was dying to learn. It was just so great for me because it really gave me a foundation in my knowledge, my understanding, and even my belief in working in anti human trafficking. And so I think it was a really pinnacle point for my own growth in my career, but also as a person. When you're like 19 years old and you learn about this horrible thing, it really wakes you up. I think Let My People Go was such a huge part of that growth for me as a 19-year-old in Oregon.
You mentioned how it was foundational. You mentioned how you're 19, you're learning about human trafficking, and then you're hearing about how we do things that Let My People Go and how that built a foundation for you for the future. Tell me more about that. That seems interesting to me.
Yeah, I think because I didn't know anything about human trafficking, was pretty much like a blank canvas. I really do think that God works in amazing ways because I never had the intention of working for a Christian organization. I had experiences in different religious bodies that I just felt like I wouldn't excel in a Christian organization. Let My People Go was one of my first ones that really showed me the way that you can have your belief and your faith and you can serve these people and it doesn't affect the way that you help these people, you serve these people, and how these Christian organizations, and especially Let My People Go, there's so much love and there's so much care and there's so much determination to combat such a dark part of the world. To see the humility that you and that Amanda had, because I worked with Amanda for social media sometimes, and to see the humility that you guys had and the dedication you guys had was so impactful for me because that's how I felt. I just didn't know anybody else that felt like that. And so it was really big for me.
That's one thing that we've always done. We do it for the love. We do it for truly trying to care for our most vulnerable neighbors. Because at the end of the day, it does come down to, I think human trafficking is a transactional injustice, but the solution is not transactional. It has to be relational.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool that you took those values because for me, sometimes when we've brought in interns, sometimes it was a good fit, sometimes it wasn't. But one of the things I have always used as a metric of success is I want to see interns take the culture that Let My People Go gives them, not just, and maybe the experiences, but the culture. And that's why I do that. That's why I have interns. We recently brought on another intern and he's fantastic. But the goal for me, the return on investment for me is to see him take this Let My People Go culture of loving your most vulnerable neighbor and bringing that to wherever he goes. Part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is because I'm like, Morgan has done that. She experienced that culture. And now she's like, okay, where am I going to go now? I've got to find a place that fits this. That's the good and the bad of an internship like that is if it does change you, now you can't just work anywhere. And you can't just work at any anti-trafficking nonprofit because you're going to find things that you're like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how they handle this or that or how they talk about survivors. And so it sounds like you were led to the right place and you have a position where you have a significant amount of influence. For me, that is success because I am so excited that someone who interned for me is influencing an organization that is caring for vulnerable people. I get miles out of that. That brings me joy. I'm so proud of you and I'm so excited that you're able to do this. What excites you about this job right now?
There are so many things I could say. Every time somebody asks me how my job is going, I'm like, my job's amazing. I love my job so much. I couldn't even express how much I love my job. I think one of the most exciting parts of my job is the fact that I get to be a part of something that is so empowering to see. Not even for other people, and this is a selfish one, but it's empowering for me to see these individuals coming out of a place that is, and I tell this, I could talk about anti-human trafficking with anybody that could listen, and I'll talk to them for 3 hours about it. And they just need to leave the conversation or else I will keep going about it. And I think it's so bad. I have to like cut myself off so many times, but it's so empowering to see the way that these individuals who have completely lost their God-given right of being free and making choices for themselves. You never really think about that as a person day to day because we live in a world, a country that is so first world where everything is accessible to us. Earlier, I was telling my mom how much I wanted a coffee. I ordered it on my phone. And it's something where everything's so accessible, just the very minimum is accessible to us. And it's so exciting for me and empowering for me to see the way that there's these people that is completely ripped away from them. They don't even think that they can leave the city they live in because of their situation. And it's so exciting for me to see the way that they come out of that, empower themselves and grow. Even more so to see the amazing people in my organization and organizations we collaborated care so much to be a part of that with them. And it's not to do it for them, but to be a part of it with them and to show that love and support. I think that working in anti-human trafficking, it's so exciting for me to see so much love in such a dark part of the world and in such a horrible and kind of scary place that it really does take a lot to see it every day. And I think it's so exciting for me to see humanity and that side of life where you could see the love of God in all these people's lives that care so much, but you can also see that relationship and love building in their faith and these people coming out of trafficking and to see that growth that they get to have. It's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
Most people don't understand what it's like to face something that evil on a day in and day out basis and the toll it takes on you and the need to actually care for ourselves and try to process through vicarious trauma, where your brain thinks that it actually happened to you because you've heard so many stories. How do you care for yourself as you're engaging these people trying to care for them?
I think you're completely right. Like working in this career, I always knew that it was going to be an emotional toll, but you have no idea what you're getting yourself into until that first day you're on the street and you're like, wow, this is really happening 30 minutes from my house. And it is really hard because there was different cases. I worked at the district attorney's office and there's so much I learned at Let My People Go and for Pillars of Hope. We have multiple cases every single month that we work of different situations. And I think in terms of taking care of yourself, one of the biggest things that I continually prioritize is my relationship and my communication with my faith and God is something for me that I never I struggled more when I was younger. I think because I was younger and I didn't fully understand myself. And now that I'm older and I understand more, I make it a point to have that relationship, but also to surround myself with people that I don't lie about my job. I do not sugarcoat it. The one thing I refuse to do is I refuse to sugar human trafficking because it's so real and it's so dark. And that's another thing I learned at Let My People Go is there's never enough people that know about human trafficking and anti-human trafficking. I think being honest with people that care about you and love you and being honest about what you see and the reality of the world is really important for me at least. And I will cry in a movie, but I am not going to just cry to people. I think it's very easy to be like, I have to be strong because I'm not going through what these other people are going through. And so I think having that environment where you can tell the truth and you're honest with yourself and with people around you about your job and what you see makes everything more livable and attainable in terms of pushing past it.
You talk about the darkness, and if you're going to face the darkness, you have to make room for the light. You have to seek the light in the darkness. And it does, it shines bright. But there's so many times where we just plug along in fields where we're working with vulnerable populations. And when you're not taking care of yourself or you're not engaging your faith and seeking God and saying, God, I need help. I can't do this. I need neighbors to come alongside of me and tend to me. I need people to check in on me. I need sometimes to just decompress. Jesus went up on the mountain. He didn't meet every need. He was the great healer, but he was also selective in who he healed. He didn't heal every single human on earth. He could have. Thankfully, because he died, we have been set free from our brokenness because of the gospel. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But when you're working in that darkness, you either run to the light or you run from it. If you run from it, you become cynical, you become jaded, you become angry. You start talking about other organizations or law enforcement, or you start talking about the people who aren't doing enough. Then you can become bitter about the even people that you're trying to care for because they're not receiving the help the way you think they should receive it. You're not acknowledging their humanity. At this point, you are just mad, you're frustrated, you're beat down, and you will be drummed out of that job within a year because you got the wrong fuel. You're doing it on your own, trying to save people when that was never your job. But as we're talking about this darkness, Morgan, tell us a little bit more about, you've mentioned human trafficking. Tell us a little bit more about, now I'm putting you on the spot. Morgan, what is human trafficking? And why should we care about it?
So there are so many definitions of human trafficking from you really did put me on the spot with this one. There are so many definitions of human trafficking from American legal standards to world standards to even nonprofit standards. I define human trafficking as modern day slavery from the darkest parts of the world. In my mind, when I think of human trafficking, it's the free will being ripped away from somebody for a commercial sex act or labor services. That's done through, and this is kind of where you get into the American legal system and how we view human trafficking. The American legal system views it as through force, fraud, or coercion. They is how they bring individuals into the life. And that there is a massive legal definition that I used to have memorized. And I was like, I'm going to memorize this so that when I start giving speeches and interviews, I'm going to know exactly what to say. And I don't even remember it anymore because I realized how that legal definition isn't always the right answer. I always think of human trafficking as modern day slavery that comes about through fraud, coercion, or force. The right and liberty to live a free life is ripped away from a person for a commercial sex act or labor services.
I think that is a great way to define it, especially talking about force, fraud, and coercion. That's kind of how it happens. People are like, well, how was this person trafficked? Were they kidnapped? They always go to kidnap because they saw Taken. And
Yeah,
they all
everybody saw
Sound of
Taken.
Freedom, or they saw a movie. And at the end of the day, when you're looking for that sensational imagery, you're gonna miss how it happens in common, everyday, ordinary experiences. And how does that happen? People are groomed. They're manipulated. They are forced. They are tricked. They are coerced into doing something they never really wanted to do had they had multiple options. Oftentimes choice is an illusion. Some people may have thought they chose, but they were shaped into doing it. And yeah, I think that is a great definition. Nonprofits, state agencies, law enforcement, they all have different definitions, but there are some definitions that hold, like the Palermo Protocols, the United Nations definition, the US State Department definition. They're pretty similar. But for Let My People Go, we've always defined it as the exploitation of vulnerability for commercial gain, whether that be for sex, labor, domestic servitude. It's someone with power and status exploiting someone with a little less. And
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, any definition that we have should include, like you said, someone's free will is being taken away. That is an exploitation of vulnerability. You're not saying people are just getting snatched up. I can't tell you how many interviews I've done over the years where someone's like, no, it's all kidnapping. I'm like, actually, it's not. I took time in my book to make sure people knew that's kind of a myth. It can happen, but it is not the overwhelming narrative. Most of the people you're meeting on the street, I would assume, were people who got the wrong job or got the wrong boyfriend, or things in life just went real south and they didn't have options and someone showed up with an answer and it wasn't a good one.
I completely agree. I think there are, obviously, when it comes to statistics, it's something where the number will never be exact because there are so many cases. I mean, I think I learned this at Let My People Go too, actually. And I remember how if you're looking at a set of cases from a human trafficking organization or a state facility, we could probably assume it's 5 times higher, or that it's just not accurate because there's so many cases that go unreported. And one of the biggest things, I do tend to go to Polaris Project a lot, which I actually think I learned about at Let My People Go too. See, this is what I'm saying. I learned so much at Let My People Go. It was so great for me. I was always paying
I love
attention,
it.
Riley. Like,
I love
this is how you know I was always paying attention. And I tend to go check on there. And so I know one of the numbers is majority with sex trafficking cases, 48% between 2021 and 2023 were familial, which is family members or close family friends. These are relationships where if you take an individual between the ages, I mean, I've seen cases at the DA's office of cases of 4-year-olds, but let's just take the average and we'll say between 12 and 21. These are people that have trusted relationships with their traffickers. And not majority, but there's a high percentage where it is a boyfriend or a close family friend or even a family member. I worked one case at the DA's office, where was her brother that was trafficking her? And these are things that where I think it's where I talk so passionately about human trafficking. I always want to tell people as much as I can because they think it's that people go to other countries and get kidnapped. I'm like, no, this is everywhere in every single community. This could be your neighbor and their child is being trafficked by a family friend that they've known for 20 plus years. I think there's just information like that people have no idea. And it's true. There's these different myths that exist about human trafficking because of the media or movies, which I think movies are great to talk about human trafficking because people go see them, but there's so much information that is incorrect or makes people think in a way that's not accurate. And it's crazy to think and I had no idea about the family aspect that majority of these, sex trafficking cases are from a familial relationship.
That's exactly right. I've heard stories of people being trafficked by their mother, being trafficked by their babysitter, being trafficked by a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I've known someone who was trafficked by someone he married for labor. Sometimes even domestic violence and human trafficking can dovetail. I remember once upon a time in New York City, when they were trying to really focus on human trafficking, they didn't have any trafficking cases, but then they went back through all their DV cases and looked for signs of force, fraud, and coercion. And when they did that, they came away with hundreds of human trafficking cases. I agree with what you're saying because that's what people don't recognize. I think that is such a valuable nugget of information is that, yes, so much trafficking is familial. I'll hear it all the time. Well, the elite are trafficking all the children. We know from stories like Epstein that, yes, that can and does happen. But the prevailing narrative is if you're out there looking for the next Epstein, you might miss the guy who lives 3 houses down. I've had friends who were trafficked in suburban neighborhoods, like nice houses. That's where they lived. A lot of people that I know who have been trafficked were trafficked by their significant other, their intimate partner. It was one of those situations, if you love me, you'll do this. And that breaks my heart that someone would violate something so sacred as a romantic relationship. But at the end of the day, it was never a relationship for that person. That person was ultimately bent on exploiting the person. And so you bringing that up, I think, is so important. Morgan, in these last moments, how would you encourage us to care for those who are trafficked?
In terms of everyday life, to be a part of the fight against human trafficking, the most important thing is to educate yourself about what human trafficking is and risk factors when it comes to traffickers and experiences that individuals who have been trafficked, and educating yourself is one of the most pinnacle ways to be a part of the fight against human trafficking. The more people that know about it, the more people that know what to look out for and what to even see if somebody is being trafficked. There are signs that you can tell when somebody is being trafficked to a certain extent, but I think really like educating yourself because there is this, it sometimes feels like this bubble that people will put themselves in where they know that human trafficking exists and they know it's a horrible thing, but their brains like block it off. And they don't think past this movie that's saying how they were kidnapped or it's in another country. They block out the possibility that this is something that is so dark, but it's something that affects all of our lives in every single community, no matter your age, gender, family status, or social status. And I think that if people educate themselves and they open up their minds to what is happening in the world, it is going to be the greatest impact that we can give.
Thank you, Morgan. This conversation's been great. I'm so glad we're having it. This is really cool. So
Me too.
You didn't think this was going to happen 5 years ago. You are. Oh, wow. Well, thank you. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in to the Mercy Cast. You are loved.